Anya, and this episode is about my favorite first date movie and the absolutely amazing abortion rom-com, Obvious Child.
It lit a fire in my belly.
Oh, well, that's called diarrhea. So, Obvious Child is a 2014 romantic comedy about a raunchy female comedian in her late 20s named Donna. After Donna's boyfriend dumps up with her, she has a one-night stand with a guy she meets at a bar, Max. A few weeks later, Donna finds out that she's pregnant and leans on her friends and family for emotional support while she goes through the process of planning and then waiting for her abortion, all while repeatedly and accidentally bumping into Max, rom-com style. When the day finally arrives, Valentine's Day, Max goes with her to get the procedure done, and then back at his apartment, they settle in for a cozy day of watching movies while she recuperates.
Surprisingly sweet.
Surprisingly sweet. So a little bit of the production history. Obvious Child was written by Gillian Robespierre, Anna Bean, and Karen Main. It was originally a short 20-minute movie that spawned from Robespierre's frustration with what she perceived as a misrepresentation of women on screen when it came to unplanned pregnancy. 2007 was the year that Juno, Knocked Up, and Waitress all came out, these films about unplanned pregnancies. And so the writing trio felt disenchanted with the representation of young women's experience becoming pregnant and wanted to make a movie that destigmatized abortion by featuring a woman who terminates a pregnancy without regretting her decision, or I think even wrestling with it too much. They cast Jenny Slate as the lead after seeing her perform stand-up comedy. So the short was produced in 2009 and released on Vimeo, where it was watched by 40,000 people. They were so inspired by the responses to the short film that they decided to expand it into a feature film. Jenny Slate is the only person who is in both versions of the film. The feature film also stars Jake Lacey, who you may know as Pete from the final season of The Office, as Max. Gabby Hoffman as her best friend. You may know Gabby from Transparent, Louie, and Girls.
I only know her from her child actress stuff.
Oh, really?
Of, like, Uncle Buck. Yeah. She's like the kid in Uncle Buck and a bunch of other stuff.
David Cross, most famous as Tobias on Arrested Development. And Richard Kind, who you may know from Mad About You, Spin City, Curb Your Enthusiasm, Scrubs.
I think he's in Toy Story. He's the anxious T-Rex, right? Yeah. He's so good. So why did you pick this movie? What was the first time that you ever saw this?
So this was actually the movie that I saw on my first date with my current fiance. I know you always laugh when I say that, but I feel like I'm hyper aware that these files are going up in the internet and people could be listening, a year in the future, 5 years in the future. Right. I guess the person who is currently my fiance and will hopefully soon not be my fiance. Anyway.
So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. So
first date movie. This is a weird first date movie.
I mean, it's probably the most, in a way, the most appropriate first date movie. It is a movie about the weirdest first date that you could possibly have.
That's true.
Yeah, it just, we were talking on OkCupid and he said he liked movies and it was playing at the University Cinema and I wanted to go see it. And so I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to send him the trailer and he can decide based on the trailer whether it's something he's interested in or not. And he said yes. So yeah, we got dinner beforehand. So it wasn't our first moment. We had been hanging out for about an hour beforehand, but we both really enjoyed it. I think my first reaction was just I was shocked at how good it was and how well it sort of blended a serious topic like abortion with such an authentic rom-com feel and just how genuinely funny it was. I was asking my fiance a little bit and he said that he thought it was a good first date movie. He said that it's sort of it puts you in a very honest, vulnerable position right away. Yeah, it got us off on a good foot, I think.
It's weird to think like how those things all work out. Like now you're getting married and you just wanted to see this movie and you're like, I hope this guy wants to see this because I really want to see it.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I would have just gone by myself, but so what did you think when you first saw the movie?
Yeah, I watched it for the show. Maybe people won't remember this from like way back from our very first episode. I had a roommate, Nick, who had to watch Buffy the Vampire Slayer in order to date the woman that he's now married to. And he was an aspiring comedian. And so I was in and out of comedy clubs with him all the time and like hanging out with comics. And so this was like a subculture that it wasn't that I chose to be a part of it. It was just like, it was in my apartment constantly.
I see.
The movie itself, I thought, was really funny, like way sweeter than I expected it to be. Like you watch the trailer and you're like, oh, this might be a little bit of like a Judd Apatow kind of gross out humor.
Yeah.
Because there's a whole thing about like peeing and farting, and it's like about like a messy realness and showing her as like not pristine rom-com heroine. But then because of that, like I felt safer like investing in the whole thing and rooting for her because I was like, yeah, she's like a real person.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like a very realistic kind of like feminist view of having a female body with female bodily functions, which makes sense because like I say this as somebody who's never had a baby, but like pregnancy is very messy. A lot of shit happens when you're giving birth, literally and figuratively. And so, you like, you can't really divorce like female reproductive issues from just like having a body and like having real body functions. One of the things that I think is so impressive about the movie is the way it seamlessly melds the serious abortion plotline with the standard boy meets girl plotline. I think the third aspect of the movie that is also seamlessly integrated in with the other two is Donna's practice as a comedian. And so there are 3 comedy sets, and they all serve as like important plot points, and they all have very different tones. And so the first one is this sort of like very cheerful manifesto of the movie, sort of like grungy body humor. It starts with vaginas and ends with farts.
I used to hide what my vagina did to my underpants. And by the way, what all vaginas do to all underpants, okay? There is no woman who ends her day with like a clean pair of underpants that look like they've ever even come from a store, okay? They look like little bags that have fallen face down in like a tub of cream cheese and then like commando crawled their way out. I surprisingly am not alone in my life. I have a boyfriend. Yeah, he's cool. He's got a, working dick. Yeah, he's a human male. I'll put it that way. But I'm still honking down on that D when I need to. Literally only when I need to. Like, it's not that I don't like doing it. It's just that after a while, it just becomes a step towards, like, getting rhythmically banged out until like your worries can go away and you can pass out for 8 hours. That's sort of where we're at. Functional. We've worked out all the kinks. I would just shut the door and like stand there for a minute and then just be like, no, don't you be your old self. And then it'd be like, but it feels so good. I got it. That's my butthole's voice. I gotta be me. I gotta be me. And then it would just be like, that's me walking up my stairs. Anyone need a barf bag?
And it's all going on over the opening credits. And so if you like haven't figured out what kind of movie you're in, you're not paying attention. And the whole point of that monologue, right, is to introduce you to Donna as a character and also to set up her somewhat dysfunctional relationship with her boyfriend, and then sort of like sets up her emotional arc for the rest of the movie. The second comedy set is when she's like in the worst throes of her like breakup trauma.
In case you can't tell from my deep ridges on my face, I was recently dumped up with by a human male who is still alive, so good for him. I feel like when someone does something bad, they should just die. But instead, we die a slow death and watch their happiness bloom. My very nice close friend, who's such a nice person, decided to fuck my boyfriend. I would love to just murder-suicide them. A lot of people say I look like Anne Frank. I would never have survived the Holocaust, that's for sure. If you were cool, this could be art. Or if I were cool. Oh, is this not working for you? Do you want your money back? Because the show is free. I want my life back, but I can't get it back because it's ruined. So that is a cost I have incurred. I'll share more. You guys seem to be fucking loving it. Full-blown affair. You know, like, who is she? Like, Faye Dunaway? You know what I mean? It's like, cool move. This kind of thing makes you think I'm pretty good at fucking, right? It's because she's one of those fucking girls with a thread count. This place is a fucking shithole, so I'm really glad to be on your roster.
Totally over the top, but like communicates like where she is emotionally in like such an absurd, beautiful way. The third comedy set is where she actually tells Max about the abortion that she's going to be getting the next day. It's like so honest and real and just present and like mature in a way that her other sets aren't.
Sorry. Which is to say to you that I am pregnant. Ooh. Ooh, okay, all right. Testing the waters. I dropped that one down. The second thing that I would like to say right now out loud, and I'm going to say it out loud right now. I'm fine. Everything's fine. Just rolling along with this out loud right now. Is that I am going to have an abortion. Okay. Keep breathing. Tomorrow, which is Valentine's Day. So we'll start from there. I'm sure you're wondering how this happened. Little thing that I like to call getting banged out in the middle of the night. The heat of the night by a very nice person that I don't know very well at all. I don't know. He was a stranger, but a nice one. Probably the best of all the strangers that are out there. That have done this. Tomorrow is Valentine's Day, and I can honestly say it's not going to be the worst Valentine's Day I've ever had. It's going to be okay because I know that I'm not alone. I'm totally here. You guys are here. You're all going to come with me tomorrow. But it's going to be I think it's gonna be okay, and afterwards I'll just I'll be in my future, and we'll go from there, right? I guess so. That's really it. You guys have been very generous to me tonight, and I've really enjoyed myself. So thank you, and happy V-Day. I hope you get all the candy that you want and deserve. That's it. Thank you.
And I think it really shows like how much she's kind of like grown as a person throughout this whole process. And it reminded me a lot of Tig Notaro's 2012 performance called Live, where she talks about having just been diagnosed with breast cancer in also like a very real, honest way. And I almost wonder if they had that in mind as they were writing that comedy set.
Yeah, I wonder. The comedy sets are so interesting because they felt very unrehearsed, both in the context of like the story, but also her delivery. Like she's very naturally vulnerable. And it's interesting that you said like she was actually a stand-up comedian when they cast her in the original short, right? She's not like an actress.
I mean, she is now, but yeah, before the short film version, it was the first like real acting that she had ever done. And then in the short film, she's not a comedian, and there's like no comedy really at all.
Yeah, because she's so upset on the stage, and she's crying, you know, at different points, and like it's a really good performance, and you can feel the kind of energy of her working something out, but she somehow feels more comfortable being in front of people and on that stage than she does, you know, one-on-one with people. Like she's not able to tell her boyfriend at the beginning of the movie that the sex is not good anymore. Yeah. But on stage, she can look right at him and be like, you know, like, oh, it's pretty boring now, which is nice. Like it inverts that opening moment, right? Where the boyfriend rejects her because of her performance, and then Max accepts her because she's able to tell him on stage. Like he accepts her as a complete person, like as a performer and an artist, but also this news that was hard for her to deliver.
Yeah.
In a way that's really satisfying. You know, you're like, oh, you're a cool guy, Max. Yeah. You're not a jerk.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about that. I mean, to be fair, like, the sex was probably bad because he was already cheating on her with that other.
Oh, right. Yeah, that guy is such a heel. Like, they just make you hate him.
Yeah, and I love, too, the way that they show her dealing with the trauma of the breakup. It's like so one good. Of the best depictions of, like, relationship grief that I think I've ever seen. I love when she's, like, standing there in the cold with her coffee, making all these, like, weird promises with her in the universe. And it's like she knows what she's doing is wrong the whole time. Like, she's not glorifying it. She's, like, so deeply ashamed of it, but she also just can't stop herself.
That's exactly what it feels like to be broken up with, right? When you're the one who didn't decide to leave and you just feel helpless.
There's that other moment, too, where, like, pours a glass full of wine and she, like, drinks some and then, like, spits it back and then just, like, chugs the whole thing. And it's, like teetering on the edge. She's like, oh, I can't get this drunk. Oh, no, I'm absolutely getting this drunk. That was, like... I listened to the commentary again because I bought the DVD for this. That was, like, one of the moments that Jenny Slate totally improvised on her own. She didn't even bother to explain. She was like, oh, no, just roll the camera. I got this. Yeah, and as far as the like, comedy routines feeling very authentic and improvised, the writers definitely came up with the plot points of what they wanted all of the routines to have and, like, what they needed to do. She definitely improvised the whole thing. Like, in her regular comedy, she basically works from bullet points and kind of riffs off of that. And so the movie scenes, they basically did them the same way. And, you know, they just, like, filmed a ton of material and then cut it down to what they thought was the best.
That's really interesting. A lot of stand-up comedy that I'm familiar with is, like, it's meticulously scripted, but then rehearsed in a way where it feels improvisational and natural. Like, I really like that they included that then. Did they say in the commentary at all if she had ever had an abortion or if any of the events are, like, based on anything in her life then?
So in the commentary, they did not talk at all about any of their personal experiences with abortion, which is interesting, right? I mean, I totally understand why they didn't do that, right? It's like they don't owe that to us, the viewers, and it is, like, a very personal thing to share. But it's interesting because the sort of, like, sharing of abortion stories is such an important part of the movie, right? Like, one of the ways in which the movie really successfully works to normalize and destigmatize abortion, right, is that as she's going through this process, you know, almost every single woman who she talks to, her best friend, her mom, has some kind of abortion story to share too. And especially, you know, like, her mom, who had an abortion before it was even legal and talked about, you know, like, going to this, like, stranger's apartment I think sort of that pre-Roe context is really important, and the like sisterhood of shared experiences is super important. It reminded me a lot of the way where if you've been sexually assaulted and you like share your story of sexual assault, people will just be like, oh my God, Me Too. Even like before the Me Too movement, right? It was sort of like no one really talked about sexual assault publicly. But as soon as you open yourself up privately to someone, like more likely than not, they have their own story that then they will share with you.
Yeah, I really love that part where her best friend talks about it, where she says like, I do think about it sometimes and I cry, but I never regret it.
Yeah.
Like, that's exactly. I've known a lot of women from different generations who have had abortions, and that is always what it seems to boil down to. Like there's a lot of gravity to that choice. It's not laden with regret.
Yeah.
Ever.
Yeah. It's like, well, okay. So pulling back the curtain a little bit, Alan and I made a decision that we were not really going to get too much into the politics of abortion during this conversation, because the movie is so much more about the subjective experience of getting an abortion, and we really wanted to sort of like honor that. It's hard to find a good middle position. Like I feel like there's sort of like two ends of a pendulum, right? Like there's the people who think that like absolutely everyone should regret getting an abortion, that, you know, it's something that you absolutely shouldn't do. And then there's the people in reaction to that, like, no, you don't have to regret it. Getting an abortion is no big deal. Like, blah, 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 blah. And I feel like this movie does actually do a good job of threading that middle ground of saying, like, yes, it can be a big deal and it can be an important, solemn decision without having it be the biggest deal. You know, it is like a very personal, important decision, just in the same way that like becoming a parent is a very like meaningful, important decision. And so not becoming a parent is also a meaningful, important decision. It's two sides of a coin, right? You know, like the decision to be a parent should be like a really meaningful, important, fraught decision. And like you should probably cry a little bit because it's like a big, crazy thing, you know? And like,
yeah.
And the same way, like choosing not to be a parent is like somewhat similar.
Right. It's not like some kind of crazy moral choice. And the movie never depicts it that way. She is more worried about like the reaction that her mother is going to have than she is about the actual choice that she's already made. It's more about the perception that the people around her that she cares about are going to have. That's what she's really worried about. It's not about like the morality of the choice. The movie doesn't grapple with that at all.
Yeah.
It makes no moral judgment about it.
Yeah, the movie doesn't make a moral judgment, and like it's not a hard choice for her, right? Like as soon as she knows that she's pregnant, she's like, this baby is not going to happen. Like
exactly. Yeah. And the stuff with Max, the guy who is the father, or whatever you want to say, mm-hmm. It's just inconvenient. She didn't think that she would ever see that guy again, and now it's like, oh, he's charming and funny and cute and interested, and it's like,
yeah,
do I need to tell him about this? Like, it's gonna mess it up. Like, he might not ever want to talk to me again, or he might try to impose his sense of morality on me if I tell him. When you zoom out and you think about this as a rom-com, is like the thing that always happens in rom-coms, right? Like, you're a sneaky reporter who's doing this story and you accidentally fall in love with the subject of your reporting, but you didn't tell them, like they don't know the person you really are, and oh my God, I'm gonna have to tell them, and will they love me now that they know my secret? Like, that's exactly what this is. The secret is a pregnancy that's going to be terminated.
Yeah.
And so the formula still works in exactly the same way. This is the thing that is preventing them from becoming a couple, but it's all about his potential reaction and her dealing with that anxiety.
Yeah.
It's not the morality.
So as far as the movie making a judgment on Donna, like the movie definitely isn't judging her for deciding to have an abortion, but do you feel like it's blaming her at all for the unwanted pregnancy. I think it's really interesting the sort of tack that they took as far as for like what causes the unplanned pregnancy, right? Again, sort of like going back to that pendulum, a lot of times unwanted pregnancies are either presented as like, you know, I was doing everything right, but I was in like that 1% where like the birth control failed, or sluts just slutting it up using abortion as their primary method of birth control. And I feel like, you know, they clearly know about birth control and are trying to have safe sex, but they're like a little too drunk to make sure that all the parts were coming together in the right way.
When I watched it, I blamed Max. Like, that's on him.
Yeah, no, that's true. I feel like when you're using a condom, like, it's your penis, like, you should know whether the thing is wrapped up or not.
Yeah. I felt like he should have been more responsible, even though he is super drunk. Like, he's way too drunk.
That's so interesting, because I feel like it never even occurred to me to blame him, which is, like, totally insane and just goes to show, like, of course it's the woman's responsibility to prevent pregnancy.
You know, we're going to talk about this in a bit. Like, she runs up against the cost of the procedure. Mm-hmm. And I feel like it never occurs to her to, like, call up Max and be like, yo, I got a bill and you're involved.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true.
But she should.
And that's actually, so that's one of the things that they talk about in the commentary. They filmed that scene a bunch of different ways at sort of like varying levels of emotion. And the takes that they ended up using are when they very specifically waited to have her start crying until they talk about the cost of the abortion. And that it's like all of those little extra barriers make everything so much harder. It's not even just the abortion that's difficult to deal with, right? It's the like, oh shit, how am I going to pay for my rent now?
Yeah, because that brings it into a space like, no, I can't go out to dinner. I'm sorry, I had an abortion. No, I can't. I'm going to be behind on my rent this month. Sorry, landlord, because I had an abortion. You know what I mean? Like, it pushes you into a space that is nobody's business.
Yeah.
Like I said, I've known women who have had abortions, and it was always this. It was always the money was the thing that I need help. I need, you know, like, I'm going to have to sell my car.
Yeah.
I knew one girl who had to do that because the guy was like, no. And so she had to make a choice.
Yeah.
And it was like, I need a ride to work from now on. Can you help me out with that? And that's how I found out the position that she was in. And it's like, that's crazy. It's a very upsetting part of it.
I'm finding it really hard to talk about parts of this movie without just having it go into a list of my favorite things. But one of my favorite things is the relationship between Donna and Nellie, her best friend. It's one of the most authentic representations of female friendship that I've ever seen. I love Nellie's like super feminist, angry rant.
Oh my god, you guys, stop it with the crazy jokes. Why do you care what he needs to know or not? You are the one who has to get this procedure. Pay for it. Wear the fucking pad with the big wings, okay? You think if he was pregnant, he would be worrying about you right now? No, he'd be trying to get that fucking thing out of his body. God damn it. You guys, we already live in a patriarchal society where a bunch of weird old white men in robes get to legislate our cunts. You just need to be worrying about yourself, and why are you looking at me like that, you little bitches?
Everything you're saying is valid, but you are scaring my dick off. Anyway, if your gut is to tell him, I say do it because he seems sweet.
The rapport that they have is such a millennial rapport, I guess. Most rom-coms, I don't know, the friendships between women just seem so superficial in a way where it's like censored to be PG-13 appropriate or whatever. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just feel like the way that all of the characters relate to each other feels so authentic in a way that most rom-coms just like don't even try to capture. And I know from the commentary something that the creators of this movie were actually like very much interested in capturing.
The archetype of that best friend character is that they're usually like more responsible than the main character so that they can give them good advice. Mm-hmm. And I think that is the relationship in this movie, but she's not like in other movies where, like you mentioned Knocked Up, like the best friend in that is like married with children and a professional job and a house and a mortgage. Like it does feel more real. Yeah, you're right. You know, one of the things that I kept thinking when I was watching it with the best friend is that she is not like typically beautiful. They didn't cast like the blonde haired, blue eyed best friend with, you know, like very femme or anything like that. Not that she is, you know, like whatever, like I'm not going to apologize for saying that she's not typically beautiful or anything, because I mean it as a compliment, both in the casting and like in the tone of the movie. It just put me more in the experience of all the characters to not feel like I'm watching Hollywood people try to be normal people, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. Well, in the commentary, they mentioned like purposely trying to like fuck up Mac's hair to make him less beautiful.
Yes.
They're like, yeah, none of the characters really look like classically Hollywood beautiful, except I guess maybe her mom, the Eileen Fisher ninja, which makes me laugh that so hard every time. Yeah.
Oh, glad you're here. Oh, you're so jumpy.
You're like an Eileen Fisher ninja.
I wanted to continue our discussion about your future.
Okay, well, I have something that I would like to talk to you about as well.
I'd like to go first.
Great.
I couldn't sleep last night, so I made a spreadsheet of all of your expenses, job opportunities, and miscellaneous tasks that I think you should focus on.
Okay, well, you didn't need to do that.
No shit. I have a student in my office right now, and I have one about to deliver something, so we'll do it afterwards, all right? Mm-hmm. Oh, and could you please go through the mail? I'm still getting your student loan crap.
That was my favorite moment. I almost fell off the couch. I was laughing so hard.
Yeah.
I was like, that is the best takedown. And I was like, I wonder if that's improvised or if that was written, because Eileen Fisher ninja is just like the best.
Oh my God, where was I? Oh, yeah. Then like, so not only are they not sort of like stereotypically Hollywood beautiful, but you know, Jenny Slate's character like very clearly reads as Jewish, and that has like shaped her identity and the way that she moves through the world. And I feel like this is one of the best, maybe the only movie I've ever seen that sort of like explores a little bit about what it's like to be a like visibly Jewish person. There are definitely situations that you get in where you are like not read as white. And one of those ways is with beauty standards, right? Like she like looks very Jewish and she feels that all the time.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Where you like as compared to like Gal Gadot.
Yeah,
of the same
exactly.
ethnicity and it's like, oh, the standard, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. That, I don't know why, but that makes me think of the scene with her father where she's sleeping on the couch and he's doing whatever with his Muppets, and it's I don't know why that felt like very Jewish to me, the whole thing. I have no experience of Judaism, but I was like, for whatever reason, I was like, oh, this all just feels very Jewish to me. He's scaring the shit out of her with a Muppet. And she's like, I'm just trying to sleep.
Let's talk more about her relationship with her parents, since we're on the Eileen Fisher ninja and puppet thread. Yeah.
They're like clearly divorced.
Yeah.
And you get the strong sense that he was the artist and she was like the buttoned up responsible one, and that like attracted them to each other, but then ultimately didn't work out, right?
Yeah.
Like
all
of that is inferred.
And that she gets her sort of like goofy sense of humor from her dad. Mm-hmm. And that her mom loves that in her in the same way that she loved that in her husband, but also is like trying to change her in the same way that she probably tried to change her husband and like failed.
Exactly. And I really appreciated all of that when I watched the movie, because none of that is spelled out, right?
Yeah.
It is just all, you just pick it up as in the performances And then, the way that the dynamics of all the relationships work. And that's why that Eileen Fisher joke is like such the perfect joke, because she just looks so perfectly put together, and like her apartment is so immaculate and everything. And you're like, oh yeah, she feels inadequate around her mother at all times, but she needs her mother, and she wishes that, she was more like her in certain ways.
I think this movie is a masterclass in showing, not telling. There's so much that is like exquisitely communicated, but just like between the lines based on the way that characters are interacting, not spelled out at all.
Where as opposed to other rom-coms, right, where you feel like everything is spelled out and they hit you over the head that like everything has a lampshade, and maybe that's an effect of it being written by women instead of, Knocked Up written by Judd Apatow, or, Rob Reiner directing a thing aimed at women and be like, here, honey, let me hold your hand and explain to you. Are you listening? Can you understand that they're in love with each other and it's hard? Not talking down to your audience is a big way to win over your audience.
Yes, absolutely. One of the best examples of sort of like restrained storytelling in the movie is when she and Max first meet in the bar. They have that whole conversation when she makes fun of his shoes for like wearing like boat shoes in New York in the winter. But they never cut to the shoes. You don't see them until like 40 minutes later, when then they're at her mom's house and swapping the shoes, and you finally get to see the shoes that were being made fun of before.
And he's still wearing them.
Yeah.
I noticed that. And I wasn't sure, like, sometimes I wasn't sure that they should be together. Like, he's such a dork. There are other times where she's joking and he totally gets it and plays along. And I'm like, okay, I'm okay with it then.
Going back to her parents, it's like she's kind of dating her mom as a dude, right? Like he's very put together. He's a business school student.
Well, he's even into her mom, like not that way, but like,
because that would be too weird.
to explain to people who haven't seen the movie, like her mother is a teacher,
business school professor.
Right, and he is her student, which is just a coincidence. Like, she's just hanging out at her mom's house at one point, and he shows up to return a book that the mother lent to him. And it's like one of these rom-com, like they keep just running into each other. But he's very impressed by her mother, and it's like another signifier in the movie where she like feels inadequate, on top of the pregnancy, to approach him, for a relationship. And she tries to diffuse it with humor to make a joke that would push him away. But instead he leans into it and he makes the jokes right back. And then it charms her more. Yeah. And it charms me more, because those are the moments where I'm like, okay, I buy this.
Yeah, yeah.
Makes me think that we should talk about creeper David Cross.
Oh, yes. Oh my God. Yeah, so let's talk about David Cross and his like creeper friend zone. So what I love about the scene, it's kind of saying two separate things. One is a commentary on like creeper dudes who, instead of just being upfront with their interest, try and finagle their way in. Like Donna rejected him years earlier, and then he kind of ignored her for a while. And now they're like just starting to hang out again. And then on top of that, I feel like it's trying to say something like very specific about comedian culture and the way that like he turns everything into a joke. Like he can't even just be real or genuine with her for 5 minutes. Yeah, and that is, like, not even a gendered thing, right? Like, that's something that, like, men and women can do to each other. But it felt, like, very authentic. Like, I don't hang out with a lot of comedians. I don't know a lot of comedians. But from watching that scene, I was just sort of like, oh, I totally see, like, why it would be really irritating to, like, have all your friends be comedians and to relate to each other without having everything turn into a routine almost.
you're exactly right, because it is the move to make the other person vulnerable. You'd be like, well, we're just joking. What's the big deal? Like, I'm just making a joke, or we're just hanging out. Why are you acting like this? As you clearly have an agenda of like, I'm going to make you feel bad so that you do this, or I'm going to take off my shirt and seduce you with my awesome David Cross body.
Yeah.
And it, like, no, I'm not falling for any of this bullshit. Like, it feels like she used to be more vulnerable to it, and now she's like older and not into like the game of this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I couldn't quite read why she was going with him in the first place. Like, I understand in the story mechanics, she needs to make this choice so that she like comes back around to Max. But at the same time, it was like, this dude's game is obvious. Like, was she doing it to be nice? How did you read it?
I think she's like still grieving the breakup, the loss of her relationship with her boyfriend. Mm-hmm. And I think, you know, when you're in a relationship with someone and you spend a lot of time with them and then suddenly they're gone, you have all this like extra time on your hands and you're sort of like, well, what do I do with myself? And I think you end up saying yes to a lot of things that you wouldn't have said yes to before.
That makes a lot of sense.
And so I think she's like craving friendly attention and just like wants to hang out with someone and like do something unexpected.
And there's like a theme of failure in her story too, like where she's bombing on stage, her job is shutting down. Mm-hmm. She like, you know, her relationship gets messed up, and then the abortion on top of it all. Yeah, and Max is like kind of a lot of pressure.
Yeah, you know, she's like, she's not ready to commit to him. She's like not ready to be in a relationship again yet. Yeah. Like she's still definitely in her just like doing random shit until she starts to feel okay again. And so hanging out with David Cross guy is like way less commitment than like hanging out with Max,
who crossed the bridge to come see her show and stuff. And like, that's a big deal in New York. You paid a toll to, you paid $20 just to show up there.
Oh, he didn't drive. He took the subway. He paid like $2.50.
Oh, you're right. You're right. But you know what I mean.
Yeah,
like, he made a trip, to come see her. And it's like, oh, okay. Well, I'm going to go. Sorry that you did that, but that's a lot right now for me. Mm-hmm. I like the portrayal of it. I don't know why, like, David Cross is like kind of perfectly cast for this.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like the whole scene, I was like, I don't know how I'm buying this. Like, why is she doing this? But what you're saying, like, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And like the whole scene works for me because of the way that she extracts herself at the end. And even she's like,
that's great. Yeah.
Like, what the... I can't believe I got this far into this experience. like that's
such a good line.
It's such a good line, yeah. Why am I here? Like, I'm leaving right now. This makes no sense. Yeah, I just... It somehow it all worked for me. So the one thing that kind of annoyed me in this movie was in the final, like, closing seconds of the whole movie, they decide to watch Gone with the Fucking Wind. Like, why? Why?
It's the...
is it just because it's really long? And they talk about like, oh, well, we're like settling in for 10 hours or whatever. But like, there are other long movies that aren't like super fucking racist. I was like so baffled. And especially because like, I mean, like not every movie can have every type of representation in it, right? Like that's ridiculous. And as far as representation goes, like the movie is pretty good, right? But like overall it does come across as like pretty white. Mm-hmm. There's the Asian Planned Parenthood doctor, the black woman who crosses the street while she's stalking her ex-boyfriend.
Oh, right. That might be the one black person, yeah.
In the whole movie. The crowd scenes are pretty good, but like all of the main characters with speaking roles are like either pretty white or Jewish. In that context, to then follow up with like, oh, and we're just gonna sit and watch Gone with the Wind, like, that made me really uncomfortable. You know?
It's weird.
I feel like if it hadn't been for the Gone with the Wind, I would have been much more comfortable with how white the movie was. Or if the movie hadn't been so white, watching Gone with the Wind wouldn't have been so bad, but like together it was not good.
So like, other than your current fiance, like, who have you recommended this to a lot of people? Have you guys rewatched it since that first date?
We have not rewatched it since our first date, and he was out of town when I rewatched it for the podcast.
Aww.
So we haven't really revisited it together either. Yeah, I haven't really recommended it to too many other people either, but that's like obviously a big part of why I chose it for this podcast, is because I think other people should see it, and I think it's something that our audience would appreciate. This movie is just so good at what it does, and it's so singular. Hopefully a lot of people will check it out based on this episode. I know that Planned Parenthood and NARAL did a bunch of promotion when the movie first came out, and it ended up making $3.5 million in theaters, which is like pretty good for an indie movie of this size and scope.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I remember hearing about it too. This wasn't one of the, like, you've picked some other movies where I've never ever heard of this, but this one I had definitely heard of before. I hadn't seen it.
I think it had a pretty wide release as far as indie movie theaters go. I think it got accepted to Sundance. Actually, they weren't even done editing it. They like submitted, I have no idea how films get submitted to Sundance, but they submitted some small part and it got accepted, and they were like, shit, like, we need to actually finish the movie now. So they had already filmed everything, and they were just sort of like doing it on their own time, and then they were like, shit, we have to get this done for Sundance. So they put up a Kickstarter and used the Kickstarter money to get it finished in time to debut at Sundance.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah.
You definitely heard stories like that from indie movies before, where there's like, and this DVD collection has the Sundance cut because the cut is different from,
oh yeah,
because it's half-ass.
Yeah. Not half-assed, just rushed.
Yeah, just in a hurry. I did want to say, like, one of the things that I appreciate so much about this movie is that you compared it to Juno and Knocked Up and Waitress, where at the end of the movie, right, in all of those movies, because they're carrying the pregnancy to term, there's the big climactic moment of having the baby, and how that's always, like, the craziness of that is always played for laughs, and the pain of it, and the screaming, and yelling at the man about this and that. And then in this movie, it comes up to the big climax of the actual abortion, which is not a big deal at all. It's just like a relief, and then she just kind of sits in a room with some other women sipping juice and seems to feel fine about everything. And it's not traumatic or crazy. And I really appreciated that in the movie.
Yeah, and actually, I really love the scene in where she's actually getting the abortion, and you're just kind of looking at her face. I don't know,
Exactly.
Jenny Slate said that was, like, some of the acting that she was the most proud of from the film. Yeah, and so, as far as recommendations go, if people really liked this movie, I would encourage them to check out the film Landline, which is also written by Gillian Robespierre and also stars Jenny Slate. It's less of a sort of sweet rom-com. It's set in 1995, hence the name Landline. Jenny Slate plays a woman who is cheating on her fiancé, and then finds out that her dad is also cheating on her mom, and kind of like dealing with all of that and her relationship with her younger sister. And it has, yeah, so even though it's in some ways, I think, a little bit darker and less sweet than Obvious Child, it has kind of the same sort of like funny, authentic, offbeat tone.
Cool. Yeah, I'll have to check that out.
Okay, so If you're interested in hearing us talk more about abortion from a more political perspective, join us next month for an episode on the book Crazy for God, which is by Frank Schaeffer. The subtitle is How I Grew Up as One of the Elect, Helped Found the Religious Right, and Lived to Take All or Almost All of It Back. And so this is a book that I read in college and just loved. It's both like a really funny, amazing memoir, and also just lends so much insight into the religious right as a political force and sort of like how it developed. And that's one of the reasons why we felt so comfortable basically like avoiding all of the politics of abortion this week and talking more about abortion as a subjective female experience, because next month we're going to be talking about all that other stuff.
You could imagine, like anybody who is familiar with our stuff, like I have a lot of thoughts about like modern Christianity and the history of like how that religion has evolved and its place in American history and all that kind of stuff. I read that book. I found it actually weirdly powerful in different ways because like I come from a similar fundamentalist background, and I found his very like warm relationship with his father extremely moving. Even though that's not, it's not like my pick, it was like a very powerful experience, and I have a lot of thoughts about it. And I agree. I think people should try and read that book or listen to the audiobook, which was excellent, if they can.
Okay, well, if you like what we do, don't forget to rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts. That's the best way for us to find new audience members. So we have 2 haikus for iTunes reviews today. The first one is for Kate. Insightful Monkey wrote a honey-tongued review in a finite time. And the second one is for Jazzy. Our musical friend watched 7 Buffy seasons. She'll be there for us. So thank you guys so much for writing reviews, and if you'd like for us to write a haiku about you, then you can leave us a review, and if we don't know you and you want it to be full of weird personal inside jokes, then I guess you can also shoot us an email and let us know some things about yourself. Okay, well, I'm Anya, and you can follow me on Twitter at StrangelyLiteral. That's strangely, then Literl.
I'm Alan, and you can follow me on Twitter at ChipperAlan. You can follow the show on Twitter at HGStorycast, and visit our website at hgstorycast.com.
If you'd like to leave us feedback, you can visit hgstorycast.com/contact or send an email to contact@hallowedgroundmedia.com. Hallowed Ground Storycast is a Hallowed Ground Media production and is produced under a Creative Commons non-commercial share-alike license.